beacon in Miami's skyline, initially built as a newsroom a century ago. Never knowing how the building itself would be written into history.
I left Cuba with my parents at the age of 5.
We were separated from our parents.
He told me that we were never going back to Cuba, and this was going to be our new country.
Thousands of Cubans leaving their homeland, children on planes alone, fleeing political persecution, but full of hope.
It welcomed over 563,000 Cuban refugees.
It became a symbol of the American dream.
We take you inside the 100-year story of this historic national landmark. It's a story of architecture, exile, survival.
Freedom means hope and opportunity, to be able to be free to realize your dreams.
It's a symbol of hope for all of us. It's what Miami is all about.
Hi there, I'm Roxanne Vargas. Thank you so much for joining us as together we celebrate an iconic landmark, not just in our country, but certainly right here in South Florida, in our community. The Freedom Tower holds so much historical significance and still to this day brings so much hope to so many all around the world. And if you think that this incredible structure is a sight to see today, just imagine what it looked like 100 years ago.
The two buildings basically were the Freedom Tower, the courthouse, the Columbus Hotel, and the Everglades Hotel. That was Miami's skyline in 1961.
New residents, big money, bold ideas, and in the middle of all of it, a changing skyline.
The building began construction in 1923 during an economic boom that was going on in Miami at the time.
17 stories went up, 255 feet, and became Miami's first skyscraper, a structure that looked anything but Miami and more Mediterranean.
It is topped by a copper dome and cupola and a weather vane. So it has a spectacular, graphically exciting top. Again, very much like the Giralda Bell Tower in Sevilla, Spain, which is actually a cathedral in Spain. The building is Mediterranean revival in style, but it was designed by architects Schultz and Weaver. Schultz was the architect, Weaver was the contractor. They were a team. They were brought here by Carl Fisher. Carl Fisher is the man who literally started Miami Beach.
The person who brought that building and development dream team to Miami, a man who undoubtedly wanted to be part of developing this magic city.
It was the brainchild of James M. Cox, who had been the former governor of Ohio and a candidate for the presidency in 1920, along with his vice presidential candidate, a guy by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who did end up becoming president of the United States.
So he turned to the tower to house this newly purchased newspaper, the first newspaper in Miami.
Now get this, inside of this building was a headquarters for the Miami Metropolis. That was the first title for Miami's first newspaper. So initially, the purpose of this building was to tell the story of an ever-evolving city.
We are connected constantly. Get your news and information from us anytime, anywhere, but it wasn't always like that. This beautiful Mediterranean revival-style tower was built as the headquarters for Miami's first newspaper.
That's what people used to call that, the Miami News building, because that's what it was.
Wolfson Archives has in its collection the first edition of the newspaper, the very first newspaper that was printed at the Freedom Tower on July 26, 1926. It's a 504-page edition of the Miami Daily News. So you kind of scratch your head and say, what did they have to write about that would fill 504 pages? But there was a lot of material in there, and it's all about everything that was happening in the city at the time.
A modern newspaper plant with print presses running right inside. An office tower that pushed Miami into the future. and ran here until 1954, when it moved out of the tower, leaving it empty, waiting to write its next big story in 1962.
The news is the first draft of history. That's what we have learned through working with the collection and with working with artifacts like that newspaper. It's where you learn about what actually happened.
The newspaper moved out in 1957, but the next chapter for the tower was already being written. In 1962, the Cuban refugees were received here. They called this place El Refugio, or the Refuge. It's why we know this tower today as the Freedom Tower.
January 1959, Fidel Castro and his revolutionary forces took control of Cuba, overthrowing the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista.
My mother somehow knew immediately that this was communism, and she had known about the trajectory of Fidel Castro as sort of a gangster at the University of Havana. So she had already decided that we had to leave Cuba.
Castro promised freedom and change, but brought political persecution, seized property, imposed restrictions. That's when Cubans started to leave, most fleeing to Miami.
In 1967, I left Cuba with my parents at the age of 5.
From newspaper headquarters to vacant building and given a new purpose. This is where the U.S. government received and processed hundreds of thousands of Cuban refugees.
The federal government came in and leased it in 1962, and it became, where its nickname comes today, known as the Freedom Tower, because it welcomed over 563,000 Cuban refugees into the United States of America and gave them the subsistence assistance that they needed as new refugees.
Between 1962 and 1974, tens of thousands of Cuban refugees passed through these doors. For many, it was the first place in America they ever saw.
You would enter the Freedom Tower through the side door on a side street, and there you would find the reception room that was usually filled with people. You would get a bag with monthly goods that they would give you just to get the family started.
We went there with my mother to receive food, military-style food like Spam and cheese and powder milk and powder mashed potatoes and powder spinach.
The Freedom Tower, a symbol not just of architecture, but compassion, a landmark of Miami's role in welcoming a community that would forever change this city.
The experience, that immigrant experience represented by this building, in the symbol of opportunity for a better life, and that's what it represents to me still today.
You see the tower right here behind me. It is open, it is back, it is beautiful, but it's important to note that wasn't always the case. When the Cuban Refugee Assistance Program shuttered in 1974, the tower fell into disrepair, even vandalized, but that changed in 1997.
By the 90s, the Freedom Tower, once a symbol of hope for Cuban refugees, was crumbling in disrepair. That's when the Mas family made a decision that would change its future.
In the final year of my father's life, which was 1997, we saw the opportunity, and I remember it was myself and my brothers driving here, and what an amazing gift it would be to give my father in his final days to be able to purchase the Freedom Tower, to be able to restore it not only in his memory, but the memory of a generation that had to leave their homeland.
They poured millions into the rehabilitation of the building. The goal? Return the tower to its 1925 grandeur and preserve its place in history in the community.
We entered into restoring the tower to its original state and how it was originally designed in 1925. It was an endeavor that took us almost 6 years.
For the Mas family, the tower is more than history. It is a lesson and a legacy.
Why did Cuba fall in 1959? And my father would always say it wasn't because of the lack of great men and women, it was because of the lack of great institutions that protected the values of democracy and freedom and free elections and the values that we as people under democracy hold dear.
The tower's history, its symbolism, and its future is a tribute not only to his family, but to the exile generation and to Miami.
This building was really meant to be something great for the city of Miami. And fortunately, by giving it to Miami-Dade College, it's been restored to a point where it's now a really quality museum type of building, and especially the latest things that they have done with it. I think it would be fantastic for people who come to Miami and see part of the history.
The Martin family among them. When the Martin family purchased the Freedom Tower from the Moss family, they gifted the tower to another Miami institution, Miami-Dade College.
It means so much for the community and the story of immigration, the story of opportunity, and really our goal here was to honor that legacy of a community that came here from the 60s on to really look for hope and opportunity.
A full circle moment for David Martin and his family to welcome back the community here to the Freedom Tower. We'll have more from the grand reopening coming up. Thousands of children were thrust into the exile experience, including a talented teenager who would later become one of Cuba's legendary singers. In his words, Willie Chirino shares his journey to the iconic Freedom Tower, plus another music icon.
I'm so proud of the exile community.
Emilio Estefan, who shares some of his first memories of coming to the Freedom Tower with Gloria. Then,
The courage they had to make that decision.
separated from her parents and sent to a new country with her sister. The Cuban exile story hits close to home for me. An emotional conversation with my mom as she relives her experience leaving her home and holding on to hope for a new start. You're watching a special edition of NBC6 celebrating the Miami Freedom Tower, history and hope from the Gale Hotel in downtown Miami.
You know his name, but do you know his story? Wilfredo José Chirino Rodriguez. He was born in Cuba, but it's his story of leaving his homeland and coming here to start over. It not only inspired his music, the Miami sound, but it inspired the Cuban exile community and became its anthem.
4,000 Cuban kids had to live without their parents. I was one of them.
From 1960 to 1962, more than 14,000 children arrived in the U.S. They were alone. They came via Operación Pedro Pan, Operation Peter Pan. Willie Chirino was 14.
We became part of the family, of our family, when my parents left Cuba with my sisters. And then the economic exile started for me.
It was one of the most poignant migration stories in U.S.-Cuba history. A mass exodus of 14,000 children between the ages of 6 to 18. They were flown here from Cuba, processed in camps, shelters, boarding schools for 2 years until the Cuban Missile Crisis grounded the program.
I was part of the Pedro Pan organization and they covered everything. I was part of that, and I didn't need anything. But when my parents came, this city, Miami, wasn't a bilingual city. My parents didn't speak English.
Like so many others, they turned to resources and support here at the Freedom Tower, all while navigating a new city, work, a new life.
The Freedom Tower was part of the survival for us in those moments, because we went once a month to pick up a big box of food that the American government gave to us to feed us, because we didn't have anything back then.
For Chirino, the Freedom Tower also holds memories beyond survival. From the funeral of one of the greatest musicians of all time, Celia Cruz.
The most outstanding event that I think that was held in that building was the funeral of Celia Cruz, in which tens of thousands of people came to pay respects to Celia Cruz.
And a gathering place for massive rallies in support of freedom for Cuba, freedom for all.
When we think about Cuba, when we think about freedom, when we think about hope, we think of the Freedom Tower. That's the image that comes to our mind. And whenever we think of celebrating anything important that has to do with freedom, with the hope, with the greatness of this city, we get together at the Freedom Tower.
As the Freedom Tower marks 100 years, Willie Chirino calls it the king of Miami's skyline, a symbol of hope that still stands tall, and an experience that still inspires his music and the exile community today.
The stories that I've shared with you today are the same stories that my family members shared with me as I was growing up. So as I dove into this project as a proud first-generation Cuban American, I wanted to revisit the sacrifice, the fear, the hope, the humility with my mom. Here's part of our conversation.
Show me your passport.
Oh my goodness.
I can't believe you still have that.
Of course, of course. You know what's funny? I was sharing it with my friend, and we all had the same haircut.
Mom is the youngest. My tia is 3.5 years older. They were born in Havana, Cuba.
Beautiful memories. And then all of a sudden, there's a big blockade of memories of happy times. It's a sudden transition to the unknown.
Like so many, my grandparents made the tough decision to send my mom and my tia here to the U.S.
I was always very grateful because, as I said, very humble, hardworking, but they had so much wisdom to assess and see what was coming. And the decision they had to make, all of a sudden, to send my sister and I over here with my aunt.
Knowing that they did that for you and Tia, that they knew at that moment this is the best decision for them.
Yeah.
But there was always the hope that Cuba would change. There was the hope that you would come back.
Well, that was never discussed. As a child, we didn't know what was going on. I was very close to my mom, so was my sister, but I cried all the way here. And I cried every night for a whole year when I went to sleep until thankfully, they were able to come a year after.
What do you remember about going to the...
It was a very eerie experience as a child. I remember my sister and I went with my aunt and we walked in, and I still remember the lighting. It was very dim, very dark, but it was that walk down that center aisle or what have you, and just sitting down, and that memory is still so vivid in my mind.
When Abuelo and Abuelo got here, what was that like?
Oh wow, I still remember as you bring that up. I go back in time and I see them. I even remember what your grandmother was wearing. And
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
It was hard. The decision our parents made has always remained a torch of strength and faith in my life. That was always a torch of faith and wisdom and strength.
And hope, right?
And hope that no matter how difficult life could get, you would always think back. It can't be any worse than what they went through. And always to be eternally thankful for our blessings.
We gather before you today in gratitude and hope as we reopen the doors of this cherished place, the Freedom Tower. Here, where history echoes and dreams once crossed oceans.
The struggles that they made, the sacrifices that they made, that they no longer live their lives for themselves. They live their lives for their children and their grandchildren.
My grandfather gave me this love for Cuba and never allow me to forget where we come from and what had happened to our families.
We wanted to make sure that we told the story of Miami through the voices of people who came through here in the most vulnerable moments with an empty suitcase, but man, a suitcase full of heart and dreams and love.
I remember me and Gloria, we used to go and wait outside just to see a doctor to get a piece of cheese or Spam. And realistically, I'm so proud of the exile community. They left Cuba and they had to start in this incredible context all over again.
3, 2, 1.
There's so many stories that are being told in the walls of this building now that I think is just so wonderful for the future generations.
It is a beacon of hope, a monument of memory, and now, once again, a place of gathering, learning, and community. If you let these walls talk, they'll really talk you about fear, sadness, and also joy, hope, and that what matter. Keep it alive for all those who has passed away, for all those who died dreaming to return to Cuba. Keep it. It's a responsibility with all of them.
The Freedom Tower, it is more than just a building. It tells our story. And now you and your loved ones can actually go inside and learn all about the beginnings of this community and all the people that have come here to start over with a new exhibit called Libertad.
Freedom, simply freedom.
A simple word, but carries so much significance.
Freedom means hope and opportunity, to be able to be free to realize your dreams.
So many dreams have become reality, and for many, they started dreaming here, wanting that freedom, la libertad.
The experience, that immigrant experience represented by this building in the symbol of opportunity for a better life, and that's what it represents to me still today.
First, a newspaper headquarters, then a refugio for Cuban refugees. And today, it is still a symbol of hope and opportunity. And there's so much opportunity through education. In 2005, the Freedom Tower was donated to Miami-Dade College.
Leading families in the Cuban exile community, such as the Mass family and the Martin families, really understood the importance of preserving the tower. And they really saw that an institution like Miami-Dade College, our community's academic anchor institution, would be able to preserve the tower for future generations.
A center for education, culture, civic engagement, and now a new exhibit here simply called Libertad.
The vision is that there'll be an exhibit that will share the story of that journey, not only just for the Cuban people, but Venezuelans and Colombians and Nicaraguenses that have all stood in front of the Freedom Tower searching for that same hope.
You'll see a replica of El Refugio, the refugee center where Cubans were processed. See where they received health care. Only here is where Cuban doctors were able to practice in the United States.
We'll also have a really special digital research room where you can research where your family, what day they came through, and you can also share your story. And so the idea is that the exhibit continues to live on through the experiences of those in our community.
A $75 million investment into the restoration of a century-old building that carries the weight of so much history, combining state support, funds from Miami-Dade College, and private donations, reinforcing its infrastructure of the tower, preserving its legacy for the next century.
It's important that we learn from our past, and I'm sure that the Freedom Tower will continue to be a living institution and a teaching institution for future generations.
That is our great legacy, is to make sure for the decades and for the next 100 years, there's a place where you can come and understand why it's called the Freedom Tower and what it means and what it stands for, and how important hope and opportunity are to this great nation.
I'm Roxanne Vargas. Thank you so much for joining us as we celebrate the Miami Freedom Tower's history and hope.